The Rise and Fall of Gurara Capital. Season 1. Episode 9, The Mask Falls.
The day of the big presentation had arrived, and Umar Yusuf could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. It was supposed to be a major moment for Gurara Capital, a chance to secure a new deal with a high-profile client, the kind of deal that could put the company back on track, and it was Ahmed who had been chosen to lead it, to present the strategy that he had supposedly developed. He had convinced Sarah Mark that he was ready, that he could handle it, but deep down, Ahmed was terrified. He had spent the last few days preparing, going over the slides again and again, rehearsing his lines until he could say them without thinking. But the more he practiced, the more nervous he became. He knew that the strategy he was about to present wasn't really his. It was Umar's work, the research that Ahmed had stolen and claimed as his own. And now, as he stood in front of the conference room, the projector ready, the client representative seated and waiting, Ahmed could feel the walls closing in. The room was full, department heads, key stakeholders, and of course, Sarah Mark. She sat near the head of the table, her eyes focused on Ahmed, her expression one of expectation. Ahmed took a deep breath, forcing a smile onto his face as he began. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm excited to share with you the strategy that we believe will help Gurara Capital and our partners achieve significant growth in the coming months." The first few slides went smoothly enough. Ahmed spoke with confidence, pointing to the charts and graphs that illustrated the potential gains, the calculated risks. He could see Sarah nodding along, could hear the murmurs of approval from the client representatives. For a moment, Ahmed allowed himself to believe that he could pull this off, that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. But then, as he clicked to the next slide, Ahmed's heart skipped a beat. It was a graph that he hadn't spent enough time studying, a graph that Umar had created, one that showed a complex analysis of market trends. Ahmed hesitated, his eyes scanning the data, trying to remember the details. He could feel the room growing quieter, the expectant eyes of his audience on him. As you can see here," Ahmed began, his voice faltering slightly, "this graph shows the projected growth based on..." He trailed off, his mind going blank. He couldn't remember the numbers, the analysis. It was all a blur. He tried to recover, to move on, but he could feel the tension in the room rising. The client representatives exchanged glances, their expressions growing wary. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her brow furrowing, as she watched Ahmed struggle. "Is there an issue, Mr. Yusuf?" one of the clients asked, his tone polite but pointed. Ahmed swallowed hard, his palms beginning to sweat. No issue," he said, forcing a smile. "Just let me move on to the next slide." He clicked to the next slide, hoping to regain control, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The confidence in the room had shifted, the air thick with doubt. Ahmed could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his hands trembling as he tried to continue, but his words were jumbled, his thoughts scattered. From the back of the room, Aisha watched, her eyes widening as she recognized the graph. She had seen it before, in Umar's files. It was his work, the analysis he had spent weeks perfecting. And now, here was Ahmed, standing in front of everyone, trying to present it as his own, fumbling over the details that Umar had known by heart. Aisha's jaw tightened, a sense of anger bubbling inside her. She had suspected for a while that Ahmed wasn't being honest, but now she had proof. Sarah, meanwhile, felt a mix of emotions: shock, embarrassment, and a growing sense of suspicion. She had trusted Ahmed, had believed in him, and now she was watching as he fell apart in front of the most important clients they had. She could see the confusion on the clients' faces, the way they whispered to each other, their eyes filled with doubt. And as she looked at Ahmed, struggling to regain his composure, a thought struck her. A thought that made her stomach twist with dread. What if Ahmed wasn't the brilliant strategist he had claimed to be? What if everything he had presented, everything he had taken credit for, wasn't really his? The presentation ended in disaster. The clients left the room, their polite smiles doing little to hide their disappointment. Sarah sat at the table, her hands clenched in her lap, her mind racing. Ahmed had tried to apologize, had mumbled something about being overwhelmed, about needing more time, but Sarah barely heard him. All she could think about was Umar, about the work he had done, the stability he had brought to the company. And now, as she looked at Ahmed, she couldn't help but feel that she had made a terrible mistake. After the clients left, the room was empty except for Sarah and Ahmed. He stood there, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. "Miss Mark, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes cold. "Ahmed, that was unacceptable. You assured me you were ready, that you understood the strategy. And now you've made us look incompetent in front of our most important clients." Ahmed opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He could feel the weight of his lies pressing down on him, could feel the walls closing in. He had thought he could get away with it, that he could take Umar's work and make it his own. But now it was all unraveling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Sarah stood, her eyes never leaving Ahmed's. "I need to know the truth, Ahmed. Is this really your work, or have you been lying to me?" Ahmed hesitated, his heart pounding. He wanted to deny it, to keep up the facade, but he could see the look in Sarah's eyes, the doubt, the disappointment. He knew that no matter what he said, the truth would come out eventually. Lies had short legs, and his were quickly running out of ground. Ahmed began, his voice barely a whisper. "I may have used some of Umar's old research, but I thought I could build on it, make it better." Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "You thought you could take someone else's work and pass it off as your own? You thought I wouldn't find out?" Ahmed looked down, his shoulders slumping. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I just wanted to prove myself." Sarah shook her head, her heart heavy with disappointment. She had wanted to believe in Ahmed, had wanted to give him a chance, but now she could see that she had been wrong. She turned away from him, her mind already racing with what she needed to do next. She couldn't afford to let this continue, couldn't afford to let Ahmed's lies bring the company down any further. As Ahmed left the room, his head bowed, Sarah felt a sense of resolve growing inside her. She had made mistakes, big mistakes, but now it was time to make things right. She couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the decisions that had led them here, but she could learn from them, could take the steps needed to fix what was broken. And the first step was to reach out to Umar. Sarah picked up her phone, her finger hovering over Umar's contact information. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had let her pride get in the way before, had refused to admit that she needed help. But now she knew better. It was okay to make mistakes, as long as you were willing to learn from them, to do better. With a determined exhale, Sarah pressed the call button, the phone ringing in her ear. She didn't know if Umar would answer, didn't know if he would be willing to help, but she knew that she had to try. It was time to face the truth, to take responsibility for her actions, and to find a way to make things right.